Okay, guys, getting right back into it. Key issue number 2 here. Why do people consume different foods? And so this is a really probably this well not probably this will be the shortest key issue section you have. I think in your book it's like three and a half pages, something like that. Most of them being graphs, maps, charts, things like that. So let's try to knock this one out real quick. When we talk about diet, okay, basic fact of the matter is everyone in the world consumes food, okay? So everyone in the world consumes food. But where it varies is in consumption, you guys, okay? In regards to what types of food is being consumed and the source of nutrients from that food, how much nutrients you receive on a daily basis, all those things are different. So the fact of the matter is diet, everyone is going to eat food, or everyone in this world consumes food in some way, shape, or form. Where we see the variation take place is in regards to food consumed and the source of nutrients from the food. Now, three things affect that, okay? Three things create this variety or this diversity in regards to food consumption. One is the level of development. Developed countries tend to consume more food and from a greater variety of sources in comparison to those from developing countries. So when we talk about level of development, we're talking about the development of country. We find that more developed countries will tend to consume more food and usually consume a greater variety than developing countries. Climate plays a factor here as well. It controls what foods are consumed in relation to the growing season. Okay, so climate will control what foods are consumed in relation to the growing seasons within a particular climate area. Some seasons we have foods that take quite a bit of time to grow. They need the right climate type that will allow for a longer growing season or allow for a wetter growing season, whatever it may be. But climate does play a factor in regards to what foods are produced within that region. Developed countries, this doesn't play as big a factor because developed countries have the power and they have the resources and they have the infrastructure to bring foods in from other places of the world should it not meet their particular climate region. Third thing is cultural preferences. When we talk about cultural preferences, certain foods are to be avoided. We mentioned this in the last chapter. Certain foods are to be avoided for cultural and religious regions, such as, again, the pork for Muslims and the beef for Hindus. So again, cultural preferences, just make sure that you understand that some foods are not allowed within certain cultural groups. Again, Muslims with pork and Hindus with beef would be two primary examples of that. Dietary energy consumption, kind of interesting. I was sitting around with my wife, who is a dietitian by trade, who works with people with eating disorders and diabetes and things like that. But nevertheless, she's a dietitian by trade, and so I had a good time talking to her about some of these things. Dietary energy consumption, okay? Essentially what they're telling you here, it's a big fancy way of saying total amount of food that an individual consumes. That's it. Okay, so when we talk about the dietary energy consumption, we're talking about the total amount of food that an individual will consume. What we're really doing is we're measuring things in kilocalories. Internationally, they're called kilocalories. Here in the United States, we just call them calories. It's the same thing. We don't have to do any metric conversion. They're exactly the same thing. So 100 kilocalories is the same as 100 calories, okay? The importance of kilocalories or calories here in the United States is it serves as a unit of measurement. So it's a unit of measurement of dietary energy. And it's usually based, so it's a unit of measurement of dietary energy, that's the first part, based upon a person's gender, size, age, activity, level, and overall health. So there's a lot of variables at play there. But essentially, when we talk about kilocalories or simply calories, you guys, it's a unit of measurement of dietary energy. And you might want to add to that, it's based upon a person's gender, size, age, activity level, and overall health. And so there's a lot of factors that kick in regards to examining these dietary energy measurements or unit of measurement that measures dietary energy. So calorie, as I told you before, is the same thing, just a different name in the United States. There's no metric conversion that needs to take place from kilocalorie to calorie. Usually when we talk about dietary energy consumption, you guys, grain is basically the seed that serves as the most common form of dietary energy. So where do we acquire our calories from? Basically, we're saying that the majority of a person's calories comes from grain. So that's what you can put next to grain right there. This grain is the majority of the kilocalories or calories in the world today. Now, when we're talking about grains, there's different types of grains out there, but the big three that we want to mention, you can see I already have them listed right here, are wheat, rice, and maize. And these top three, or these big three, whatever we want to call it, big three, top three, account for 90% of all grain production in the world, you guys. And if we take a quick look right here, you can see how those big threes, maize, of course, be represented in yellow, rice is in green, looking at a big part clustered in the regions of East Asia, Southeast Asia, and of course South Asia. And then we're looking at wheat scattered all across the world. So these are your big three, and we wanted to talk about each one of those just real quickly. In regards to wheat, it's the most distributed. I showed you that again. You can go back to 352 and take a look at that. It's the most distributed of the cereal grains. That means it's the most spread out of the cereal grains would be wheat. And again, wheat and grain playing such a major factor in people's diets. This is how the majority of their dietary energy that they acquire comes from here. So again, wheat is the most spread out, or it's the most distributed of the cereal grains. That's one thing you could put down. You can go back and you can look at the map, or you can look at the writings that I put down for you. But when we take a look at that, the locations are Europe, North America, Central Asia, Southwest Asia, all produce wheat in some way, shape, or form. Rice is the most consumed of the three. In regards to population of people that actually eat rice, it's the most, or eat grain, which everyone does, it's the most consumed of the three cereal grains, okay? So when we compare it to wheat and maize, rice, more people are eating rice than the other ones. Wheat is distributed along a part of the world at a much greater rate. But again, looking at our maps right here, the reason why rice is the most consumed of the cereal grains is because you have your most populated country in the world with China right here, and then you have your second most populated country with India right here, and then you have your fourth most populated country in Indonesia. So again, when we talk about that huge clustering of rice growing region, there's a lot of people that are consuming rice. So more people eat rice than any other type of cereal grain out there. Maize, or corn as we call it here in North America, and we mentioned this before, is the leader. They actually produce more corn than any other product. Okay, but a majority of the corn is used for feed rather than for food. So next to maize, you guys, quite a bit of this is produced. Just make sure that you know the majority of maize or corn is used for feed for livestock rather than food for people. All right, so feed for livestock rather than food for people. Where it says some areas of the world differ, just make sure that you guys note in places like the sub-Saharan Africa, Venezuela, these are two areas where these big three do not serve as the primary dietary energy that's consumed by people. There are different areas. So sub-Sahara tends to look at cassava, for example. Venezuela looks at sugar. This is where they consume more or a larger percentage of their diet, or where they get a larger percentage of their dietary energy from, or their calories from. So again, but most of the world centers around these big three right here. And we talked about how they fit in regards to world relations or world distribution and clustering. Wheat, more spread out than any of the other two. Rice, most consumed. Maize, again, the majority of corn that is made, quite a bit of corn is made, but the majority of it goes into feed corn rather than like sweet corn or something like that. Corn syrup, it also can be turned into as well. Protein. We talk about protein real quick. This nutrient is needed for both growth and maintenance of the human body. So it's an important nutrient for both growth and maintenance of the human body. The biggest thing that we want to note, the most fundamental difference when talking protein here, especially amongst developed and developing countries, you can find it on page 353. I'll mention it, and then I'll show you. In regards to meat, you guys, it's the leading source of protein in the developed countries of the world. So again, in the majority of people in developed countries get their protein from meat. Okay, you can see that 1/3 of all protein actually consumed in developed countries is in a meat form, versus 10% or 1/10 in developing countries. So a huge disparity in regards to people that are getting protein from meat-type products. The developing countries of the world tend to focus back on their cereal grains that we talked about before. This is the leading source of protein in developing countries. So meat is the leading source of protein in the developed countries. Cereal grains is the leading source of protein in the developing countries of the world. Okay, so you can note that. Now, going back, you can take a look at it. If you want to take a quick look at page 353 right here as it loads up. So we take a look right here, and you again can take a look at right here in this graphic right here. You're looking at developed countries such as the United States, Canada, for example. You are seeing that the leading protein source is going to be meat in comparison to other places of the world, sub-Saharan, a large portion of Mexico and Central America, Latin America, you could say, outside of here, which is Brazil, and then of course Argentina, which is a major meat producing country. Okay, so taking a look at that, that's what we're talking about right there. Last but not least, nutrition and hunger. Surprising fact, I could not believe it. My wife, she confirmed it as well, and she showed me that it is indeed true. But 1/8 of the world's people do not have enough food security. Now, to you, that might not mean anything for those of you that don't know what food security is. Some of you probably know what it is. Others of you are probably wondering what it is. When we talk about food security, we're referring to the access at all times to safe. We're referring to the access again. To safe and nutritious food, sufficient to meet the dietary needs for an active and healthy lifestyle. So essentially, we're talking about the access. Whenever we talk about food security, we're talking about the access to food sufficient to meet our dietary needs, you guys, to maintain an active and healthy lifestyle. So what we're saying is when 1/8 of the world's population do not have enough food security, we're essentially saying that food is difficult for them to access to the point where it's going to affect their life, their living style or their standard of living, and in a sense, the overall sense of health. So 1/8 of the people do not have food security. So that's where the access to food is not good enough for people to maintain a healthy and active lifestyle. A couple things talking about calories. Remember, we're talking about the kilocalories. I'm trying to be more international, so we keep referring to kilocalories. Remember, in the United States, it's calories. When we talk about 1800, this is the number of kilocalories needed for an average individual to maintain that active lifestyle that we talked about before. So they figured it out. An average person needs about 1800 kilocalories to maintain that active/healthy lifestyle. What we found out is the average number of kilocalories consumed in a day across the world is 2,800. So it's 1,000 over of that base requirement. But unfortunately, this number is really misleading, you guys, because developed countries drive this average way up. They drive it way up with places like the United States where we're seeing 3,600 to 3,800 calories consumed. So this is a misleading stat because some of these places, you guys, in the world, or some of these developed countries of the world consume so much that you're going to end up seeing that take place. And again, you want to probably take a good look at some of these maps right here where it talks about kilocalories or simply calories for a person per day. You can see that the United States and other developed countries, that number is way up, where in other places of the world that number is less. And so what happens is the average actually gets driven up because of places like the United States that are looking at anywhere between 3,600 to 3,800 calories a day. So that number is misleading. Obesity, this is more prevalent, and it shouldn't surprise you because the more calories that you have, you guys, and the less activity that you do, the more likelihood that you are going to become or approaching obesity. And so it's more prevalent in developed countries than developing countries. So here's a health concern. Usually when we talk about health concerns, we tend to focus on developing countries in comparison to developed countries. This is one of those rare moments where it's just the opposite. Obesity is a bigger problem in developed countries than developing countries. Undernourishment, though, is a bigger problem in developing countries than developed countries. When we talk about undernourishment, we're basically saying that that dietary energy consumption that we talked about before and defined earlier in this podcast, the dietary energy consumption is below the minimum requirement for a healthy lifestyle. So you're not getting enough calories, essentially, is what we're saying. You're not getting the right types of food. We are currently thinking about 870 million people. Again, the estimated figure is about 870 million people are living in undernourishment settings where they're not able to reach their dietary energy consumption level that they need. Again, talking about that bare minimum or that base minimum of 1,800 kilocalories. Maps on the maps, the graphs, the charts, a variety of information. 354, 355. I cannot emphasize that enough to go over those because it really cuts out and really talks about a lot of things that you just wrote in your notes. Told you key issue number 2 was going to be fairly quick, at least more faster than the other ones that we had. So for right now, we're tuning out of key issue number 2. This is all you got for today. You may start key issue 2 packets if you haven't already. So go ahead and start working on those as well. Have a great rest of the night, and we will see you tomorrow.